Hey everyone, Adam Kanakin here at ILEETA 2022. With me this morning, Chrystal Fletcher. Chrystal, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
This is exciting. You know, you've been here all week. You're teaching this week here at ILEETA. What is it that you're teaching? I
chose to do a class called Your Female Shooters. If they're failing, you're failing them.
That's so interesting. And, you know, there's obviously with Todd and with the other instructors here, he's been saying, like, we need to get you here to teach, to talk about what you need to talk about, because it is so important. It's female shooters is kind of one of those things it's always been that one thing in firearms training where it's like people can't seem to figure that out yet. So can we walk through a bit about your class and what it is that you're actually talking about this week, and what are those takeaways from it?
So I'm kind of taking a different spin on it in that like you said, the traditional ways that range training has been done isn't really working for her. And some of the reasons isn't just the smaller statue, the smaller hands. Our brains are differently wired. You know, we've grown up with different societal, social pressures, demands, expectations. And, you know, as a trainer, one of the things you're trying to do is, you know, build that conditioned response. Well, in childhood, our conditioned responses have been built differently than the boys. And so that's why a lot of times, you know, you'll see when women get frustrated on the range, you can see the waterworks come out, which exacerbates the problem, because that's just born out of frustration. She's
Right.
Frustrated because she's failing herself because she knows she can do better. She's frustrated because she's failing her mentor, her coach, her teacher. You know, so she feels like she's letting him down, her range instructor, and she's frustrated because now she's frustrated. But somewhere along the way, you know, as we're raising our children, we say, you know, a little boy falls down, skins his knee, rub some dirt on it, get up there, you're fine. Or, you know, a lot of times the little girls, oh, come here, sweetie, it's okay. You know, just let it out. Mm-hmm. Well, those neural pathways are being built, and that conditioned response is being built. And you can't always just turn it off because you're a big bad policeman, you know, carrying a gun now. You know, once you hit that wall of, you know, your cognitive abilities at that point, then that is a response that a lot of men don't know how to deal with on the range.
That's so interesting. There's a few things that you said there that are like just bouncing around in my head. One, I don't know if you knew this. So I have 4 kids. So 2 boys, 2 girls. They're all very, very little, under 4. But when they, like what you had said, it's funny because my wife and I had a very, very clear discussion about this early on. It's like, I told her, I said, I don't care what happens. I said, we're not coddling any. So what, like, my daughter, my oldest daughter, hurts herself more than anyone else. And she's the first one to just be like, just take a dive, do something, and then gets up and I'm like, you good? And unless she's like, there's some serious injury, she's like, yeah, I'm good. And then she keeps moving. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, so it's funny that you said that, because that was the first thing that bounced around in my head.
I was a total tomboy too, and I was completely like that. And I'm talking about, you know, species-wide, broad generalizations and our way we
100%.
raise our children. You know, there's going to be outliers on everyone. You know, I was that little kid with the slingshot and the frog in my pocket, you know, and bouncing off walls. I still to this day come home with bruises, and Todd's like, how did you get? I have no idea.
Yeah, there was, but one thing you said, and this is something that I'm super passionate about, it's we, as instructors, we have to understand how to teach human beings. Like, I think that's kind of that thing that we forget. It doesn't matter what you're teaching, the first thing you need to do is understand how, as a human being, to teach another human being. Or more specifically, adult human being teaching another adult human being in the law enforcement space, because that is different. That it's different than teaching a child, but the principles of adult learning are the same across the board.
Yeah.
But we don't account for that sometimes. And like you had said, there's a huge emotional aspect. The way that the brain works in multiple people is so different. And if you don't understand how to contextualize that information by each learner as an instructor, you're not going to be able to be an effective instructor.
Yeah, and part of the traditional way of range training is put everyone on the line, put them in the same position, you're doing the same drill, we're just trying to make clones of everyone. Well, we don't need everyone to do the same thing at every point in their job. So part of the thing with the different genders is we're very different, but we're very complementary. And those differences is what really made us the most successful species on the planet. So if we can embrace those differences and work within them instead of trying to work against them, then I think that we'd be a lot better off. We hire police officers on the basis that they make good decisions. That's their primary job, is to problem solve other people's problems, right? And so we need to give them the ability to use that brain and make those decisions when we're trying to train them, so that we can to give them the why. So, this is what worked out really well for us. Give it a try. If it doesn't work for you, then discount it. But we need to find something that does work for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So if we're talking to firearms instructors, what are those takeaways that you want them to walk away from when they sit down with you here at ILEETA? What are those kind of core? Are there some core concepts that you're like, hey, if you walk away with anything, this is the one thing I want you to take with you?
When it comes to my class, basically, everyone needs to have high expectations of their shooters. Never saddle any of your shooters with a curse of low expectations. Everyone has that potential. The path to get there might be very different. And as instructors, we need to take on that responsibility to find that way to get them there, so they can go home every night to their family, so that they can not just survive the career, but thrive in it, physically, emotionally, financially, because an officer-involved shooting has a huge financial, potential there. So we need to consider all of those aspects when we're training our people and take that responsibility seriously and put everything we have into it to make what we know work for her.
Yeah, well, I can't agree with you more. I think that's phenomenal. And so with all of the training that's happening in law enforcement right now, do you think that we still are, where do you think a shift still needs to happen? Because, I mean, when we did this big poll of the industry, and out of everybody who answered, all the instructors, they said we're at like a 5 out of 10 on our industry as a whole. That's not a good sign. But I feel like that too, and it's really interesting because we have these groups of firearms instructors that are great shooters, but it's because that it's a small agency maybe, and so what happens is they're like, hey, we're down an instructor. And it's like the next time at the range, you have an officer who shows proficiency in shooting, and they go, "Hey, dude, you want to be a firearms instructor?" And they're like, "I guess." They send them to a 40-hour instructor school, and they're like, "Hey, here you go teach." And it's like that. It just doesn't work.
And the irony of it is, once you become a firearms instructor in that program, you shoot a lot less because you're busy doing all of the other stuff that is required. All the you're up there posting the papers, and you're up there doing that stuff, so you're actually not on the line shooting. So that's the irony there. But I think that culture shift, and I hear that talked about a lot here at ILEETA, where we're embracing more of the culture shift to being that mentor instead of that drill instructor. Being that teacher instead of just that instructor. Don't tell them what to do, teach them what they need to know, instead of just trying to get them to produce a product, the end result.
It's funny. Two things that jump to mind for me. Two different quotes from two different instructors here at ILEETA. One, Brian Willis. I was lucky Brian Willis was my first instructor trainers. And I don't know if this quote, he came up with this or it came from someone else, but essentially I remember him saying very vividly, he says, you're not here to show them what you can do. You're here to show them what they can do.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, I think, a lot, especially in the physical skills world. That was DT stuff. In the firearms world, I think sometimes that's an issue where it's like, hey, check out what I can do. Well, nobody cares. Guess what?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you can do. And then the other quote, and I can't remember what the other quote was right now, so I'll leave it. But that stuff right now for me is so paramount that we take instructors and we bring them forward into this new idea that, one, we have to continuously learn and evolve as in trainers and instructors. And I do remember what I was going to say with the other quote was that Lon Bartel, who's just a great friend of mine. Shout out to Lon, but he said we have to start taking instructors and instead of creating instructors, we have to create coaches. And because an instructor is one, we have an idea of what an instructor is. A coach is designed to get the best out of that student on that day.
Yes.
Right? So, and that what that level is going to vary day by day by day. And you have to be able to bring the best out of that person each and every day. And
you have to be able to recognize when things are starting to fall apart. And so that you don't create a problem on top of, so you're making headway, they reach that point where your advice is no longer being effective. Well, that might be a time that you need to give them time to process that information and come back and build upon it later. Where, when we do our block training in law enforcement, you're there for 8 hours, we're going to punch through, we got you trapped here, and even though you might be actually counterproductive because it's either too hot or too cold, or they've got some family emergency running in the back of their head, and so they're just not there. And so you're really being counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish, especially with females. Because one of the things about, specifically females is we have all of this other responsibility that's going on in the back of our head above and beyond our cop work and our range training. So, I had a conversation with one of our students in our last class and is she there, or is she thinking, man, I got to make sure that Tommy's at baseball practice at 4 and I got to pick up, I got to make sure I got milk and I got all this stuff going in the back of my head. Or, and he's like, I never thought of it that way because I know that my wife's got it handled. My wife's got it taken care of. It's like, yeah, can she say that about you when she's supposed to be doing something like this? He's like, oh, God, no. And so that's something that a lot of the men instructors and firearms instructors have never actually even thought about. That the women have going on in the back. It's kind of like a computer. It's a program running in the background, but it's keeping her from reaching her full potential at that moment.
Well, and that goes back to these scientific principles of humans, right? We know that women are better multitaskers than men. We know that. That's been scientifically proven. That's not even a discussion point anymore. So it's a simple fact like that, though, that you have to take as an instructor and understand that, right? Because I agree with you. My wife always says, she's like, how do you just, I'll put on a show and, I'll just, there could be 1,000 things going on and, I'll just put on a show and I put on a show so that when I watch it, I can just watch the show. And literally, my brain puts 1,000% energy and focus into one thing, and that's it.
We can't do that.
Right. And so, because she was like, how do you do that? Yeah. And it drives her nuts. But you're exactly right, because on the range, that could be something. And you know what? Another great guy here, and I just keep putting people out here, but Joe Willis brought up this concept with me of check-ins and check-outs in training. And I think that would be a phenomenal tool. You get to the range, and I know we can't do it especially in the law enforcement. It's easier on the private sector a little bit, but law enforcement, it's hard to say, hey, we'll do a check-in, and I go to you and I was like, hey, what's going on? And you're like, there's this and this. And I know that you're not going to be checked in. It's like, hey, you know what? Come back, we'll catch you on the next serial or whatever. Go home, take care of whatever you need to do. We can't do that a lot of the times, unfortunately. But to give those instructors those skills to be able to identify it and modify what they need to do for that learner that day.
Exactly. Yeah, because what might be going on that day at the range might have nothing to do with anything that day at the range. And being able to recognize those kind of things and see your shooters as human rather than just, a way to check that box and get that training done, put that paperwork in, it's done, they're qualified, they're trained, whatever your procedure may be. But to see them as human and recognize all of that other stuff. One of the things in some of our classes that our certification classes we do is we make our students do a 10-minute presentation, classroom presentation on anything other than law enforcement or firearms. And that is the point where the class really starts to meld as people. Because now they're not just seeing them as another shooter, as another cop. Man, that guy, he's a beekeeper. Man, that guy's a master golfer. Man, that guy is, And so it's like, they're people now, and you can really see at that point the class turn inward together. And we need to do more of that interpersonal stuff within our departments. So how many people work with somebody they have absolutely know nothing about? You know, in Todd's career, he'd come home and he'd mention somebody. I was like, who? I never even heard of that guy. He goes, yeah, he works on the other side of the week. I've never met him. He's worked here for 2 years and I've never met him. You know, and that's him. Yeah. You know, so there's that kind of thing. So if we can attach some humanity with it, then I think that especially for the females who really crave that emotional connection, they will get a lot more out of their shooters.
I love that. I love the concept. I'm excited that you're here. You're teaching this class this week. I have one last question for you, Chrystal. You're here at ILEETA. What keeps bringing you back to ILEETA?
Just the atmosphere. Everybody's so enthusiastic. Everybody really wants to be here. You know, it's not like in-service training. These are the best of the best, and people wanting to learn from the best of the best, and just the enthusiasm of wanting to be here. Yeah. It's infectious.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time with me this morning, and good luck with your class the rest of the week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Cool. There we're done.